At the end of the day, it's always going to be the human that's the weakest link.
So I don't think they're the weakest link. I think that humans are the greatest strength if enabled properly. So if you click on a link and it's got malware on it, it's got a cred harvester. If that leads to your company going down, that is not a human failing in the sense of the human that's interacting with the phishing email. That is a organizational governance and society failing for enabling people to build this stuff and give it to people and operate it in a way that is so dangerous.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on another episode of The Pivot with Maltego. Joining us today is Daniel Card out of the UK. Hey Daniel, how's it going? Tell us what's making you crack open today.
Oh well, today I'm in the middle of a mission to download the internet, which is obviously a bit of a weird thing to try and do, and a bit of a joke because I'm not actually trying to download the entire internet, but currently
would not be surprised.
Well, I haven't done the maths to work out what we need to do that, right? But I'm looking at large scale, high speed internet intelligence gathering, and we've just been downloading a million. Well, we've been sending a request to I say the top, but like the top 1 million domain names, and we're looking at what speed different tools get, and then I've written some really bad PowerShell, like really bad, but I got quite a good speed compared to like HTTPX. And then my friend Lars has been helping me, and he's writing a Go version, and we're getting we're looking at rates of downloading around hitting 1 million sites in around the 40-minute mark. Maybe less. I think it was 37 minutes his last run was, and we're putting servers in different places. So we're looking at what we can do from a sort of monolithic point of view, as opposed to building out a scaled out infrastructure or using functions as a service. So we're seeing what we can do for fast-paced intelligence gathering to support essentially country level or large organizations' cyber defenses. And to understand security postures at scale. So that's what I've been doing for the last. I'm not going to try and remember how long I've been doing it for. Maybe the last couple of days. I haven't shaved, and I should probably go outside at some point. But
so we went from 0 to 100 there. What made you guys even come about doing this?
So I think it was last week. Bear with me on times because sometimes time runs away or doesn't. There was someone tweeting around Killnet launching denial of service attacks against local authorities in the UK, and it looked like someone doctored a screenshot, and I sat there and I was like, okay, is it real, valid? Is it possible? Obviously, knocking some stuff offline is actually quite easy. And then I was like, okay, well, how do we make sure that we've got the right intelligence to be able to validate intel, right? So I was like, cool, how quickly can I actually check whether a site's online? And I've done work around this before using monitoring tools, but I was like, okay, well, most stuff comes with a high overhead, and you need, if you're looking at HTTP monitoring and service monitoring, you need a lot of context. So I was like, well, how do you do it if you don't have a lot of context? So I then screenshotted, say, I can't remember the numbers, but thousands of websites. I just use a headless browser and took screenshots of every page. And then I was like, okay, well, how fast can we do something multi-threaded in PowerShell? And can we check security.txt, which is a file that people can put on their web servers, so that if a security researcher or or like the cert of a country. If they need to contact the security people, they've got a way of finding out who that is. So I started doing scanning for that security text file, which has got, as expected, a really low level of adoption. So, but it was just really looking at like really wide, broad internet active enumeration in a passive and legal, or not passive, in a friendly manner that is just your web browser hitting off a request rather than anything else. So that was what sort of led into the how fast can we scan and what resources do we need and what kind of money can you do it at. So what can you do if you're at different grades of defender organization and then different grades of attacker, so that we can see like what could a bored teenager do on a residential line with a £1,000 laptop, scaling up to what can you do when you've got a credit card and cloud services and money isn't too important from that perspective. So that was kind of the that's what I've been looking at for the last.
So it's like an experiment, like this kid a couple of years ago tried to scan the entire internet and just find out what's open, what's not open, and try to get into certain places. But you're actually doing something for a research perspective.
Yeah. So like, I'm not trying to break in anywhere. I'm not doing port scanning. I'm just literally doing HTTP GET requests. So I'm visiting a website. I'm obviously not visiting millions of them, but the code we're running is visiting the site. And then doing like a number of things. Like we can read the responses, we can read the error codes that they return. We can look at the TLS, the encryption exchange between the client and then the server we're connecting to. We can look at the DNS metadata and the IP metadata, and then look at the response of the pages. So what I've had is also, while I'm doing this, again, this was like snowballed off of a quick idea. As we've been like writing the responses to disk, I've been doing it on Windows Box, and Windows Defender on some sites is going off. So we're finding potentially evidence of malware on websites by just doing this, like visiting them. There's obviously, I haven't validated that, so I've got no idea if they're false positives or incorrect string matches. But basically, it's I've now got a list of sites that's quite long, not compared to a million, obviously, but there's quite a few sites that have pinged up with various different types of malware, from crypto miners, some bad redirects to malicious sites, etc. And we haven't done any analysis on the data. That's literally just been Windows Defender saying, once you've cached that page and downloaded it as a file, it's scanned it, and then it's popping up saying, there's a detection here.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, okay, so I think my first question will be, where did you get this list of websites? And second, what are you doing with these websites that are triggering these alerts?
I got them from the internet.
I think I've walked into that one.
Yeah, like no, but like it was the Alexa Top 1 Million, I think. But essentially, through various research projects and activities, I've got lots of data around lists of sites, like generating. I think one of the things is I do a lot of attack surface management for work, and I do a lot of working with organizations to understand their internet surface, and I've done stuff at country level scale. So like generating data and scanning and understanding things, there's a few different approaches to this, one of which is like take IP spaces and go raw and just start spraying everything. I don't tend to do that unless it's like an authorized specific thing that I'm looking for
with some scope.
Yeah, but also like there's a lot of IP space that I don't care about. And I mean, I don't care that someone's house might, someone's home router might get pwned. I just like, my focus on what I look for is stuff that could be country affecting, that could be serious like harm affecting. I try and look at stuff that's how do we help enable business and academia and like healthcare and government and big stuff. It's like we probably don't want to have that exposed online. So like I don't tend to just like port scan en masse huge parts of the internet. I also won't do random connections depending on what I'm doing, because I don't want people like I don't want to set off any IPSs, and B, sometimes you want to be a bit more stealthy about what you're looking into, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I tend to take the approach of doing like human-based asset discovery and doing a lot of research, right? Really, this is what everyone hates doing. Like people are like, oh, okay, I want to start scanning and I want to start getting code running, and I'm like, I want to start understanding what I'm looking at first. So I tend to do like lots of DNS enumeration, go to passive data sources like passive DNS, getting stuff from certificate logs, like the certificate transparency logs, using platforms like Shodan. This is where I reckon a bit of Maltego and stuff, and I'll start in getting data sources where I'm not sending packets particularly, other than to the service providers. And I'll try and build up a picture of what I'm looking at and why I'm looking at it, and then I'll go and look. With the 1 million, we grabbed that because I was like, well, we need to baseline something, and I don't want to be setting off grey noise or any honeypots, and I don't want to be noisy on the internet, which is obviously a bit counter to the statement for when you're looking at 1 million sites in a short space of time. But I'm trying to be like considerate to what I'm doing. But the million seemed like a good idea, right? There's 1 million top sites from Alexa or some other marketing sources that we can get. How quickly can we send like a really small, exactly get a web browser to visit the site, and then what can we do with the data? What comes back? The stumbling across the defender detections was totally not. It wasn't a planned for thing, right? It happened depending on what method that was being used. If I did a curl request and curl doesn't have a JavaScript enabled like parser, so it just gets the raw HTTP data back and it will spit out probably a small file. Whereas when you visit with a web browser that's got JavaScript and CSS and all these parsing engines in, the web servers return different content. So I found a marked difference that when I was using a library that was basically a browser versus just HTTP as a protocol, that's what kicked off Defender. And then the more I've scanned, the more detections I've got. So it then goes to, well, are they real? What sites are we detecting them on? Are they important? As in, I'm sure they're important to the people whose sites they are or the visitors, but like, do they look like stuff that is, more risky? And then obviously, then it goes into like notifying people. So it's complicated. The finding stuff on the internet is really quick in the grand scheme of things. I actually put a tweet out today, like with a diagram saying like, here's the scanning and discovery part. And I say it's quick, right? It can take days and weeks, but it can be like minutes, hours, days, weeks, maybe months, right? But largely speaking, you can do stuff in a really short period of time. If you find something, and this is the same whether you find something from research or whether you find something from a work point of view, largely speaking, what do you do with it?
Yep.
Is it a real thing? Is it important? Will someone else care? It might be interesting, but it might not be important to someone else, or it might be important to yourself. And then you've got to go find someone to tell. So do you contact an organization directly? Do you, look for the security.txt, which hardly is ever there? Do you see if they've got a bug bounty program? Do you see if they've got a vulnerability disclosure policy? And then let's say you find someone, and then you've got to have a conversation with them, and again, how do you do that? Do you need to have OPSEC considerations and personal security considerations? Do you need to obviously, be mindful of what you found, how you found it, what and how you're reporting it to someone? Because this can get messy, right?
That's what I was about to branch off onto. Like, I can't imagine what your reporting must look like. with the
I largely
scale
don't
and
report.
depth of what you're getting into.
I largely don't do private sector reporting unless it's something that's on, significant, and then I'll usually tend to ask on Twitter, etc. I've got a friend, if I'm honest. Like if it's a public org and I find something, I won't personally. I won't contact the orgs unless it's like really bad, because it's just painful. It costs a lot of money. It's time consuming, and sometimes people really don't respond well. I'm lucky so far, touch wood. I've not had any of the really negative consequences.
Yeah.
But I've got friends who, you find something, they report them in good faith, and then you've got lawyers or police knocking on your door. And I personally haven't got the time for that.
How often has that happened, though?
What's that?
How often has that happened?
To my friends, more often than it should.
Yeah.
Obviously, it sounds stupid. I don't ask everyone, right? But there's like public cases of my mates, and there's been issues with the CMA. There's been legal people involved. There's been police involved. And, the law hasn't caught up with the technology, and society doesn't really understand like cybersecurity. If I'm honest, from my perspective, it's really fast paced. It's really it's like worrying about everything with a microscope, and everyone else just wants to be up in a plane. So the two different views of the world, we look at stuff and we want to put a million microscopes everywhere and try and find the vulnerabilities, try and find the baddies, try and find ways to help keep people secure. And most people just want to log into TikTok and like watch a video.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting topic because, for example, even in Germany, and I think it's some other parts of Europe as well, it's illegal to scan and finger websites and domains, essentially. So I've heard of situations where you have police knocking on people's doors because they were just curious.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm really specific with what I ever look for, right? And I use loads of passive sources of data, but yeah, I mean, you've got to be. It's weird. I want to be careful how I phrase this. People should be considerate and careful and legal, right? But also, we also need to educate people in how this works, because the criminals are scanning and doing whatever they want 24/7, 365. We run honeypot networks, and I can find like pretty serious organized crime quite quickly. Getting rid of it, that's a different question. But like, yeah. I don't think people know exactly how the internet works. Some people and their marketing stuff, right? Sorry for all the marketing people that do this, but like, they're like, a bazillion cyber attacks occurred, and I'm like, it's not a bazillion, is it? It's one. They may have sent you to 2 million packets, but that's one actor. So like, trying to define what is and isn't a cyber attack, what is an event, what's an incident, and how to put metrics. Like, marketing people go mental with this. I don't really understand it because it becomes a game of one-upmanship, right? So trying to work out, like, I'm really cautious with what I do, and I'm really purposeful with what I'm looking for, if that makes sense. Because I don't think people, from a policymaker through to a personal person, really quite gets how this works. So yeah, there is risk, and I'm hoping that at some point the UK government and other governments, but the UK government reform and change the Computer Misuse Act, so that we are both enabled to defend the country, do research, and do business. Like, there are commercial implications of laws prohibiting basically benign passive actions. So, and also, bear with me, I'm not a lawyer, but like, if I write a bit of software for research to ransomware a computer that I own, that shouldn't really be illegal, but it probably would be under the Computer Misuse Act as it's written.
Yeah.
So it's
it's how you interpret it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, right? Like, some people are idiots, man. Like, I've had people send me DMs, and I'm talking about my friends. I'm talking about random people. I've had people send me screenshots or photos of them throwing exploits around the internet, and I'm sitting there going, like, I don't want to know that you're doing that. Well, I do want to know, but like, don't. Why would you send it to me? It's like,
Yeah.
So it is. It's a weird landscape in the sense of all of this stuff comes with like, however you do stuff. If you're gathering intelligence, if you're doing like penetration testing, if you're doing like defensive work, if you're doing architecture, all of this stuff is sensitive in the sense of we are able to get large amounts of intel against around organizations, around countries, around people, around groups, around software, and then there's all the confidentiality. There's just a lot of sensitive information, right? And even stuff that people think is benign might not be when you chuck it all together.
Connect the dots.
You don't really want an enumeration map of, say, a country to be just sitting on the internet for someone to pick up and go, oh, look, there's all these ports exposed. Now, you also don't want to try and have everything through obscurity, right? So, like, you can go on Google, you can go on Shodan, you can go on Census, on Binary Edge. You can, I won't remember every single search engine that's available, but this stuff exists. So there's also people need to understand that if it's already there, and if you've got an insecure server exposed, making someone aware of that doesn't change the game. If no one published, say, a blog about it, the server's still there, the bad guys are still hitting it. The difference is, if we hide everything, is that we don't enable people to change policy, get investment, and drive forward better, essentially a better humanity civilization way of working with technology. If we just ignore it all and say, oh, only the bad guys care about that, it needs to be done from a benefiting people's perspective, and people need to have their eyes opened a little bit, because I don't think people realize how the world is. I think they have a Hollywood image of it. I think they have an abstracted image as well, because my missus said this to me the other day. She went, Dan, if most people knew all the stuff that you and your friends know, they probably wouldn't they probably wouldn't be so happy every day. She said, it must drive people nuts. I don't know if she was making a point there about me being nuts, but it's difficult, right? Like, in the security world, you are looking at negative stuff a lot. I mean, I'm lucky. I don't have to really go near the really bad stuff, right? Like, some people have to go through a lot of dirt. And this came up the other day, I think, where the idea, I don't call myself an ethical hacker. I'm not, like, I don't even know what it means. The idea that you can do all this stuff and not look inside the dark parts of the internet doesn't work, does it? It's like saying, I know what I need to be able to defend against an army that have got swords, and I haven't worked out that shields exist, and so we're not going to get a sword and work and defend against it. We're just going to, hope that it works. I think that's a really bad analogy, but I think people need to realize, like, how this actually works in practice, in terms of, if you want to defend against malware, you need to be writing malware. If you want to be defending against cyber attacks, you need to be attacking stuff. You need to be attacking and defending and learning. Not only do you need to be doing that based on what we know that threat actors are doing, but we also need to be doing that against stuff that they aren't doing. Because we don't know everything. There's a huge visibility gap, right? You've got what people, I could use the Donald Rumsfeld analogy, but you've got what people can see, and you've got different companies like AV providers and DNS providers and ISPs, and you've got lots of telemetry, but you've also got there's a gap, and also they're disparate and siloed, right? So not everyone is going to share their data, and not everyone is going to build the same picture when they smash different data sources together. And there is no omnipotence on the internet. I mean, you can send a cat GIF and it could be malware, and no one could know about it. You might have a novel technique. So I think it's important that people understand the kind of research that's needed. But we need people to be doing this, right? And people do it. There's a community.
Yeah, I think most of the successful organizations in security and who are actually confidently securing themselves are doing exactly what you said. They're attacking themselves, they're researching themselves, they're looking at their vulnerabilities and weak spots to make sure that they have their shields up, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's the juxtaposition between, I say it's the 90%. 90% of organizations that I look at do not do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Despite what marketing says, security postures are quite weak globally. In most organizations, they're quite weak. It doesn't matter, from my experience, and I've been doing this stuff for a while, right? I've visited hundreds and hundreds of companies, and I've traveled around the world to some places. So hopefully my view is fairly representative. Obviously, I don't know everything. And I haven't worked with every single vertical in every organization. There is just, there's differences. Regulated orgs sometimes are better, but not always. Like, I don't think there's any particularly like a label I could put in where I said, oh, do you know what? I've been to this organization and that's been amazing, or this like sector. And I think people have a sort of, again, this goes back to my Hollywood, I call it the Jason Bourne effect, but people are like, oh, banks never have security problems. I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. Where did you get that idea from? Or like, governments don't have problems. Like, or military cyber don't have problems. And I'm like, what? And I see people say stuff, and I do this stuff a lot, and I sit there sometimes and I'm like, how did you get this idea? And it's that assumption that someone's doing it, that it's okay because magic. And we don't have magic, we have science. We have finite resources, we have finite skills, we've got finite motivations, etc. And the only way to solve this stuff is A, to tackle the human society part of conversation, right? If it's bad, people need to be told that it is the way it is. And if we need to improve it, which I think we do, then we need to say that, and we need to set in path like policies and mindsets that say, okay, well, we need to invest. We need to, I don't want schools to be vulnerable. I don't want hospitals to be vulnerable. And they are.
Yep, they are. It's interesting that you say that, because just this morning I was looking at a free cybersecurity learning resources, because it's always interesting to see what's available out there. And I'm always interested to see what else is coming into the CTI world, like what other resources are coming up, or are there any fees that we can get connected to. Believe it or not, one of the courses were specializing in human communications. I think it's definitely one of those angles that are lacking with a lot of practitioners. But let me flip something you said around. So you've seen many different parts of the world. You've traveled to many different companies. Is there something common within the companies that are actively, employing methodologies to secure themselves?
Contractual obligation. I'm kidding you not, right? Like, literally, the driving force in most scenarios I see is a contractual requirement to meet security posture X is what drives organizational change, has been my experience, right? And I'm saying that is not always the case. I look at a lot of contracts, I look at a lot of security postures, and I can tell you that they don't always align, right? Mm-hmm. I think really it's like understanding, and I think it's understanding that you don't do security in isolation. If you do, it's just the cost. If you do, it's just friction. If you do, it won't be aligned, relevant, and probably suitable for the business outcome, right? Or the organizational outcomes you're going for. Has to be taken from a quality, safety, risk perspective. Operational Operational excellence is being secure. If you're not doing it well and the user experience isn't good and you're not getting the business outcomes, is security adding value? Is everything always about, oh my God, we need to stop the baddies? Yeah, of course we do. We need to stop them. But security to me isn't that. It's everything. It's got to be like whole of society, whole of life, whole of organization. It needs to be about excellence. If you have an excellently operated and managed system, it will be secure. Probably, again, it depends on the inputs, right? If you have no security input, knowledge, and experience thrown in, then it could be really efficient. It just might have, it might be a leaky bucket. But largely, that's how I see the difference. Is if you care about quality and if you care about the details, and you've got a motivating reason from a business perspective and organizational perspective to do it well. And it's really hard because the words I'm using are quite hard to define, and we could talk about maturity assessment, but really you're not asking what looks good from an abstract point of view. You need to be asking what looks good for my company, what keeps me safe, what keeps my team safe, what keeps my brand safe, what keeps my customers safe, how does my supply chain fit into this, how does this work with the organization or with if it's not business, like how does it work from a personal level? I ask people randomly if I get in a taxi, I'm like, do you use a password manager? Which obviously everyone thinks I'm a weirdo, but most people do not.
That would be a weird question. Like you get into a taxi, hey, can you take me to Piccadilly? Oh, by the way, do you use a password manager?
Do you know what's weirder though? People say, what do you do? And sometimes I just lie, right? I'll just say I work in marketing. And and other times, if I tell people, like sometimes I'm like, oh, cool, I work in IT. Sometimes I'm like, oh, cool, I'm a cybersecurity consultant. And it depends on the person, right? And all of the bad stuff, all the stuff, like you'll see the NCSC put this stuff out loads, like set passphrases, use a password manager, enable MFA, right? That would be like the message that the industry, the market, the security services, like that is like everyone's, I don't mean this in a negative way, beating everyone over the head with this message, right?
Yeah.
The percentage of adoption for these things is low. Most people that I've been like randomly interviewing, etc., and looking through breach data, etc., like people's passwords are rubbish. We go and do password audit for organizations, and you're like, what? Like they are, our cracking rates that we're getting are horrendous. Like there's a debate in the security community about whether you should do password auditing because obviously the risks that creates. But I'm firmly in the point of you do what works for the organization, and if you're dumping their AD and their passwords are all like Monday 1 ! That's a problem. And you go into people's personal lives, and again, I don't try and like batter my friends around the head with this stuff. But like people's personal security and their personal use of technology is shocking. Like, and I'm talking about their individual with families. Like kids are being given phones and laptops with no controls on them. They can get anywhere on the internet. Like it's difficult. So we've got this like complete whole of society, whole of life challenge, and we put technology out in the world really fast, right? I've got a video diagram I made, and it's got my date of birth in it as well. So I won't share it. Like it's like it says like in the like up to like the 70s and 80s, tech growth like from a computing point of view was like that, and then it's like this, and it's faster and faster, and it goes everywhere. You can't like try to operate off grid is really difficult. So
everything's an app. I mean, sure, right? You want to get this, it's an app. You want to check the weather. You don't even go to a weather website anymore. You got it on an app. So that's where the adoption versus security issues come in as well. And I speak to quite a few people quite often about security audits and what are they doing about password audits. And if you look into breach data and just password dumps, and you look at where those actual breaches are from a specific domain or organization, it's scary actually how bad these passwords are. The first three letters of every row of the keyboard is like the most famous one, or like password one.
Yeah, and
It's
like don't get me wrong, people are like, oh, passwords are dead. I hate all the like expressions about things being dead, because I was told ransomware was dead, and it's not. And it doesn't work that way. Technology change at a protocol and foundational level is a much longer change than let's all leave Twitter to jump on a different social media platform. Like, it's not. It doesn't work that way. So like, passwords are going to be around for a long time. Now, the people's passwords are rubbish. Now, I've got a lot of kit, right? And I sit there going like, how do you set up a device really badly? It's really easily. And like, I won't name names because I can't remember them. But if you want to sign up for the usual suspects of social media and getting online and being a digital person, I've been setting up socks, and I'm like, man, this is a really shit password. Like, and you can set stuff up where it's like, it's really easy to get an account somewhere with a weak password, with just generally making your digital life frictionless, right? And then when you add this stuff in, which is the point I was getting to, is like, password managers are difficult. I don't care what someone says. Like, you tell someone to install KeePass X and then to have it stored in your Dropbox and then have it synced to your devices, or even just to sign up for like 1Password or LastPass, or I can't remember the bloody ones, but like, this stuff is difficult, man. And then you've got MFA. Don't start me on this, right? Because like, MFA, it's great. Then lock yourself out, and then lose your recovery codes, and then get compromised on your email, and break down what's going to happen to someone. And it all starts to be a bit annoying. Yeah. So again, it's like, don't get me wrong, I've got MFA, and I haven't got MFA on every account. I've got like some accounts I don't care, like, but I've got MFA on a lot, to the point where when MS and Google Authenticator and MS Authenticator and stuff, they've got a search feature now. So I was like super over the moon, because I'm sitting there scrolling through, like, you've got 1 minute to enter in an MFA code, and you're like, crap, like.
I feel you, man. I get this.
So what I'm getting at is, it's still really difficult to operate in a secure manner. Yeah. Things are not secure by default. And I don't think that we've done, like, I don't think there haven't been improvements. There absolutely have, right? Like, there's amazing work that people are doing in big companies, in small companies, like on the streets, as it were. But it's still really difficult. We're not where I think people say we are, right? I put stuff on Twitter, as people will probably know, but like, I'm like, there is no Gandalf smashing his like rod down and saying, you shall not pass. There aren't magic cybersecurity shields that suddenly appear from nowhere. This is not the way that, you don't just deploy an appliance and then everything's done. It's a real human-led change process. And when you think about like, how do we change? It's got to be with, don't get me wrong, I'm a massive technologist. We've got to be doing it with a human-centric view and getting the technology right. I hate this phrase now because it's been around for too long. But people are always saying about people, process, and technology, and it does need to have the right mix of things, right? If you go too heavy in one way or the other, it goes wrong. If you just do security awareness training, you're asking someone, and this annoys the hell out of me, don't click it if you don't recognize the source. Well, I'm in sales, so I don't recognize the source of loads of my emails. Yep. It looks suspicious, don't click it. Everything looks suspicious. What doesn't look suspicious? I mean, the amount of marketing emails and bank emails I get that look like they could be phishing. And then there's like the technical vulnerability scale of it. We're telling people to do the impossible, right? And it's like, there's a lot of emphasis on awareness training. It's in every compliance requirement. And I sit there going like, I don't care if someone clicks a link. Cool. Go ahead. I designed the system so, well, again, nothing's infallible. I work with companies and I'm like, cool. Like, I'm not saying that I want people to like purposely collect stuff that looks really stupid. We can't be giving people computer systems and saying, use it properly, otherwise your whole organization could get ransomware.
Yeah, I think, I mean, even for kids, it all comes down to education. I mean, what looks suspicious in an email? I mean, you need to actually tell people, like, at least look at the font. It's the most, at least for me, that's one of the easiest things to pick out.
But it's,
But
I mean, we did some stuff on Twitter the other day, and like people got involved in doing this. So we were putting Cyrillic and Unicode, and I put up stuff that was my name and you couldn't tell, right? And what this is only, I'm not saying people should operate in a silly manner. That would be silly. But why are we trying to put all the cognitive load on people? Your security is okay if Jane or John checks a font. What they need to do is get an email, copy it, paste it into another thing, chuck it into CyberChef, go and use a load of enrichment tools, get a magnifying glass out and make sure it's okay. It's nonsense.
No, exactly. That's what I was saying. Like, who does this?
Well, not being funny. If you're on a telephone, cool. Or if you're like, I'm not doing this now, right? But like, say if someone emailed me or a customer like pinged me a DM and it was like urgent, need to do this, right? You might be doing two things at once, and you might be like, oh, click, and then you might be like, oh, that I need creds. Oh, here's my creds. It happens. It's. I don't know. Like, we've definitely, from my perspective, we talk a lot about human-centric security, but I don't think we've got there. I think there's a lot of effort spent with comms, which is great. We need that. Don't get me wrong. You absolutely cannot hide in a cupboard and do this stuff. However much some of us would like to do that. But it doesn't matter. Like, there needs to be a reality check of, like, we can't ignore the fundamental vulnerabilities that we are playing with here, and that, if we put too much on the human, it's boring, and people must get bored, right?
Well, that, or it's a lack of care, right? I think you can't, at the end of the day, it's always going to be the human that's the weakest link.
So I don't think they're the weakest link. I think that humans are the greatest strength if enabled properly. So if you click on a link and it's got malware on it, it's got a cred harvester, if that leads to your company going down, that is not a human failing in the sense of the human that's interacting with the phishing email. That is a organizational governance and society failing for enabling people to build this stuff and give it to people and operate it in a way that is so dangerous. Does that make sense? So, like, I don't think that. I mean, like I said, I take the view of, cool, like, click, go ahead. Like, if our controls and if our technology and if our processes and our response capabilities and our monitoring and everything, if they're not able to cope with people clicking links, they're screwed. Because at some point in time, accidents happen. I think it was my friend Danny, but like, someone was saying about the phrasing, so I'll probably get this like wrong, but in the sense of there's 3 laws that I've seen years ago. It's like, hardware fails, software has bugs, humans make mistakes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we can, like, to me, it's like, cool, I accept that. I know stuff breaks. I try and design solutions that are resilient to those laws. And most networks you go into are really not, right? Like, if you get into someone's network, you can usually roam around free, undetected and unchallenged. It's getting harder. Like, as more organizations deploying endpoint detection and response, as more organizations are seeing the negative impact, and it's huge, right? I won't try and quote the numbers, but the cybercrime numbers are insane.
It's growing.
Money impact is significant, right? So we are seeing like a massive change in that aspect. But I just audited. We did like 10 different Active Directories. Every one of them within 15 minutes of running, like after doing 2 minutes of scanning stroke discovery and 15 minutes of 1 cup of tea, I'm like, cool, right, we can attack you this way and probably get domain admin and probably ransomware your company.
It's scary. I mean, it's scary. It's. I think people really underestimate what can be done, and also together with that, like the hacker's mentality, or let's say the malactors mentality. I don't like to use the word hacking or hackers because it's becoming a bad word. I mean,
I'll be honest,
say, right?
It's what, to me, it's like whatever works. I'm not overly pedantic always. Sometimes I go insane, obviously, because nerds.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I'm not. I'm the last person not to laugh at that. I mean, far out.
We do. This is one of the things. I look at a number of people doing cybersecurity work and how many people are in the IT. And I'm talking globally. I look at numbers, right? Or try and look at numbers, because it's not like someone's drawn a map for us in the world of this. And I'm like, we are the thin end of the wedge, right? We are like, and we are funny. It's like, don't get me wrong, I mean this in a really positive way. Like, we have some really diverse people thinking. I mean, I get called crazy a little bit, right? Like, and we need that. We need people thinking out the box. We need to take different views and perspectives, and we need to be experimenting and doing, stupid things like, what are you doing this week, Dan? Well, I'm going to download the internet, right? We need that to be able to build a resilient society, to build defenses, to get the right balance of investment and the right policies, the right laws, the right enablements from people spending on research and then people spending in industry, and all of this entire life view, because that is, tech is everywhere. I'm trying to think of what you can do now without being on a computer. I don't mean obviously you can go for a walk without being on a computer, but you've probably got a phone in your pocket. If you get on a bus, you're going to be tapping a contact list card. If you go and buy something, try and operate without touching computers and you won't get very far. So it's like these are everywhere, and we have done a great job from a functional point of view and a shockingly bad job as humanity from a security point of view. And it's coming home to bite us in the arse. If you look at the medical data breaches, like the advanced breach in the UK, that's had awfully not a lot of noise on it, and it should really do, because potentially that's a lot of sensitive mental health data, or even wider than that. And in Australia, they've obviously had a breach recently of medical data, and it's a problem. And I was saying about people getting bored. Maybe bored's the wrong word to use, but people are getting pwned every day.
Yep.
And we have this risk as well with if we aren't communicating effectively from an industry, from a society, from a marketing perspective, essentially, everyone's just going to be like, I don't care. And I talk to people like normal people, right? Like not cyber nerds sometimes, and a lot of people say to me, I don't care. They can have my data. I don't care. They've got it all anyway. I don't, and I'm like, what? Do you really want someone having that information on you? And it isn't they don't care. They don't care at that point in time. They would care if they had negative consequences to it.
Correct.
And that's the difference, isn't it? It's like, oh, it's never going to happen to me. And then it happens. And then people panic and people are not happy. And it's horrible, right? I had a family member ring me recently and they're like, oh, I've done this. I'm like, cool. Is this the same password for everything? And they're like, yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, right, cool. Let's go through and change it. And they've got a lot of accounts. So I don't know, I think the understanding what the real world of the internet is like is really important, right? I do think people have a very warped view and they think a cyber army is going to come and save the day I think that people need to understand what happens in reality on the internet. I think, I think society has this view of control, and we use it a lot in the infosec world, the word controls. And you know what humans are really bad at doing? Controlling other humans, right? So like the way people work on the internet, the way people work in humanity is not necessarily how someone's policy or control statement describes, right? So it is about understanding that delta between what you think the world works like, what you'd like the world to look like, and then how the world actually operates. I think we've got a big gap in some of that. So I think getting this stuff right is difficult.
Yeah, you know what bugs me the most though. So I had a couple of friends who were who live in Australia. So I was talking to these guys about the breach, and I was sending them alerts from the companies that have been breached. And the crazy part is I didn't see any of these guys taking responsibility of not securing this data. Everything's about hunting the bad guys, but no one coming out and saying we messed up. They use words like, "Oh, we're devastated to find this out, and we're shocked that this has happened." Like, guys, why didn't you? I mean, isn't it a bit too late to be saying these words? What were you doing all this time? You did have all these people's data, telephone numbers, passport numbers, license numbers, everything. Addresses, phone numbers, everything's in there. What were you doing all this time until waiting to now to say, "Oh, we're devastated by the turn of events"? No,
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah, and this is like I'd really like that point, Brad, because one of the things that I work in like offensive and defensive security, right? So and like there's loads of names for everything in the world as always. I don't really care about labels so much, but like there is not the focus globally on defense. And when I say defense, I mean cyber defending of organizations. But I think there should be. I think the CTI world is obsessed with chasing bears and pandas and putting together like cartoons and stuff. And I don't mean that as in this is not a slant on CTI as a practice, right? Because the practice is cool.
Yeah.
The industry, not so sure, right? Sometimes I think to myself, like, given that for a cyber defensive world to exist, a cyber offensive world must also exist, and therefore industries that thrive on crime, it does beg a question of like, why isn't there real conversations about country level attack surfaces? Why are there not honest conversations about what systems are like? It took me like a few cups of tea. Everything gets measured in tea, right? A few cups of tea, and I'm sitting there going like, I think that the service was probably designed like this. I can grab Visio and I'm like, cool, there's tender documentation, there's public reports, there's snippets of information, or there's stuff that there's metadata that I can look at, and I can genuinely reverse engineer what someone's environment looked like when even just from the news saying there's been a ransomware attack, and I'm like, cool, it's running 2012 R2, it's running this storage platform. I'm like, and I'm looking at the tender contracts and stuff, and I'm like, there's no way that's been modernized. There's no way that's been secured, because there's money in these things, right? And the world does run on money. I didn't invent the world, but like, and it goes into this, like, why are people not defending? And I'm not saying people are doing a bad job. I'm not saying people aren't trying, in terms of like, it isn't a negative statement. It's just an honest statement of, if I think, and I think Dave Kennedy actually uses a similar stat. So hopefully me and Dave are not completely a million miles apart. Why are we saying 80-90% of security postures are really, really bad? Now that no one, people do say it, but there's not a lot of focus on it in terms of, I don't think there's appropriate comms. And I think is it because people were scared of saying things are bad? Hell, I've designed systems and I've looked back in time and gone, hell, that was bad. Why did I do that? Like, I didn't realize that config could be exploited in that way. Like, I think in the cyberspace, there's this idea that you can be like perfect and that you'll be all knowing and omnipotent, and I'm not. And I go into lots of orgs and I go and look at their networks and their people, process, and tech, you know, and I don't work with like small inconsequential stuff, right? So sometimes I'm looking at really serious stuff, and what people say and what's said, people aren't being honest. And I don't mean honest for the negative side. I mean honest in a, here's where we've got better, here's what we've got in place. Strategically, long term, there's loads of good stuff around education, about cyber awareness. I mean, hell, we've even got a whole month dedicated to the thing. And there's money being put into, you know, like the initiative of Cyber First for the UK and CSC, all this great stuff. And it's all like the long-term foundational bits, absolutely. But I'm seeing gaps where I'm like, cool, like the attack surface here. You know, if you're going to tell someone you know cyber punch them, you probably should make sure that you've got a shield first, right? And I'm not seeing the shields. I'm seeing the. I reckon someone could take that out pretty quickly if they were motivated. You know, and I try not to have conversations. I try and be measured and balanced in like how I talk about attack surfaces and how I talk about this stuff, right? Because I think it can scare people as well. Hell, it scares me sometimes. I go and look at some stuff and I'm like, Jesus, how is this still? How is this online? Is it pwned? And like, and that's another bit that, you know, there is a probability factor in here. Just because something is vulnerable does not mean it's exploitable. Just because it's exploitable doesn't mean someone has exploited it. It also doesn't mean they will exploit it. I literally build honeypot networks where I've done this with entire like simulated full networks. So DMZs, application servers, backend Active Directories, workstations, development machines, like the, you know, lots like. And I'm sitting there going, cool, I've just exposed RDP on port 4995. And the passwords shit and the usernames like scanner. And I'm sitting there watching all the logs because you put telemetry around all of this because it's fun to watch. And I'm like, I'm bored. There's no one touching it. And so I break in every day. I'm like, is it still vulnerable? And sometimes stuff doesn't get hit. So there's this weird, you know, you have to have the right alignment of stuff. Like there's the other people say like defenders have got to be right every day. An attacker only has to be right once. For an attacker to be right, there's usually about a minimum of 7 things that have to have gone systemically wrong, and all have to be in alignment for things to work. So if you get into someone's like perimeter network, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to move. Like people do not talk about how difficult some of this stuff is. In 90% of, let's say 90% of networks, it is a problem. Like, you know, you can move everywhere and it's ridiculous. And, you know, I've been doing testing and they've had a managed SOC, 24/7 coverage, and I'm sitting there running tools, laughing. I'm going to customers, have you got an alert yet? They're like, no. I'm like, cool, let's run some more tools. And like, have you got an alert yet? And I was like, I got like domain admin an hour ago. I've put out a GPO and all your machines are now not ransomed because that'd be ridiculous. But like, I'm like, I could do that, and no one knows. So I think because of the complexity of how this stuff works and the probabilities and the reality that it's not all just an architecture diagram with security or SOC on it. When you get into the nitty gritty, I think that like it's really complicated. And then it goes back to this communication piece. Anyone that's worked in sales will know that if you try and sell something complicated, it's a lot bloody harder than if you try and sell something simple. So,
yeah.
But I think that we're at risk from a society point of view of oversimplifying everything and then making the wrong calls because the hard calls are hard and the decision making on complexity is more complex. That's my kind of view of the world.
Let's dial the wheel back a little bit. I have one question. Where did you start and how did you get into this world?
Doom, the old one, like the DOS version. Um,
Do you remember Dangerous Dave?
What's that?
Dangerous Dave? Remember Dangerous Dave?
I don't know. I'll have to Google that in a minute. Right, I'll have a look.
Back in the days of DOS games.
So I used to play Wolf 3D.
Oh wow!
I used to have an Amiga, and what I used to like Afterburner on the Spectrum, where you have to use bloody cassettes, and like to start the game, you had to rewind the cassette because you didn't from the last time you played it, and then you put cassette 1 in, and you're on the runway, and then you get to the end of the runway, and you put cassette 2 in, and then you take off, and then cassette 3 when you launch a missile. Like I started playing games when I was a kid. And I really wanted to be a game designer, and I used to make some Half-Life levels and did stuff in Worldcraft and Quake and Doom levels, and I'm really bad at all of that stuff, right? But I really liked technology. I really liked I can't remember how old I was. I was really young, and I went and killed malware like using floppy drives, and I really like helping people. So like all this stuff is like, that's what made me sort of get into this space. Like the security world and the IT world, people have got very, I think, odd views, because IT and security and technology, it's all pretty much the same stuff, right? There's completely different mindsets, lenses, and skills and specialities, absolutely. But what we're talking here is about how do we secure people using computers. We're not saying how do we put a flak jacket on someone and a Kevlar helmet and give them a rifle. We're saying, how do we protect people on computer systems? So that's really where my journey started, is a kid playing games, learning how to code badly, doing like level editing and graphics design stuff and 3D modeling and all the stuff I'm pretty bad at, and exploring computers that way. And then obviously when you're a kid, you like to break things, because who doesn't? And then from a professional point of view, like I was done lots of different roles in tech, but I moved quite quickly into design roles. So I was designing solutions and re-architecting and understanding businesses, and looking at the really fun parts like the operating model and the organizational structure and the finances, the portfolio, and the ROI, and all of the bits that you need to be doing, because without any of the logistics, resources, money and drive and motivation to do anything, you aren't going to be playing with some cool technology, right?
Yep.
You know, this stuff doesn't exist in isolation. I find a lot of people, I think, like to exist in isolation, and it's really fun to look at something like, you know, a bit like the downloading the internet joke. That's fun. And then I sit there going, like, okay, great, like what do I do with this information? One of which will obviously try and help people, but then the second part is like, oh, is there a marketing angle to it? And it doesn't mean, don't get me wrong, loads of the stuff I do, I might write a blog post, and the blog post sits on SharePoint. Sorry, Ed. And it doesn't always get released, right? So there is that sort of point. But that's really where I started with games. I was going to join the army when I was younger, but decided not to for a whole host of reasons. And then started working professionally at a young age, and now do weird cyber stuff and crazy experiments and people ask me what I do, and I haven't got a clue what I do, but go and try and help people defend against the cyber baddies.
Well, that leads to my next question. What are the 3 most important things you'd say to someone who wants to get into this industry? Let's say that the 3 must-dos, or 3, let's say characteristics or attributes that someone should adopt to get into this.
So I think having an open mind is really important. You know, you don't break into stuff by doing things the way they're meant to be done. So being inquisitive, being challenging, asking questions, being mindful of what people say versus what's real. you may come into the industry and people will tell you that everything's amazing and that their cybers are solid. They might not be, right? And that's, I think, we talk about imposter syndrome a lot in the industry, and I think that doesn't help. This idea of mythical, all-knowing, omnipotent positioning. It's not real. So, like, I think get grounded, speak to different people, make sure you've got a good set of inputs, and also, like, be realistic. We obviously work in a really booming industry, depending on obviously country and location, all of it. The money isn't always particularly awful, is it? But also be realistic, right? Like, I see some people talk about money, and I sit there going, can you go and look at the average salary for people and go and walk down the road and speak to someone? And be realistic about this stuff, right?
Yep.
I think people sometimes believe their own hype a little bit too much, right? In the end, that there's nurses and doctors and teachers and there's people in society. Cybersecurity is not the most important thing in the world, right? But it is also really vital. So I think this is the balancing thing. So get good inputs. Don't expect to know everything. No one knows everything. Be humble. Ask questions. Share knowledge. Don't be a dick. Is pretty much my piece on that, because it's really difficult. It's really broad. It's really fast paced. It's really fun.
Yeah,
like, I'm not kidding. Like, and I say this Jason Bourne effect, but some weeks I'm going through my list of what I've been working on. I'm like, that's really cool, scary. Never thought I'd be saying that ever in my life. So there's like opportunities to do really cool stuff. But in the end, it's like, these are computer systems, right? You can install a hypervisor and install some software and connect to a cloud service. That's what people use. So it's like, there aren't, generally speaking, magic. There is no magic, unfortunately. I love Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, but like, computers are science. There's humans. There's the real world, and then there's films. So like the films for what they are, and appreciate them for the art and the fun, but also like, it's science, man. Like, people run SharePoint servers, people run Windows backends. Make sure you've got a broad lens and you've got a reality check, because I see some people and I'm like, yeah, that's not how business works. That's not how society works. That's not generally how computer systems in those scenarios work. So
it's insane. I think I think one of the commonalities. So I've been doing these kind of conversations or podcasts for a little while now, and I think one of the most common traits that everyone from different parts of this spectrum, whether it's CDI, whether it's malware analysis, whether it's law enforcement kind of intelligence, defense intelligence, one of the most important things that we come across is curiosity.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about you need to be a little curious. You need to ask a few more questions, and I think it's interesting because the more you ask questions, the more information you get as well. And right now, especially after the pandemic, and I think the pandemic also sort of increased the amount of communication and information that's coming into everyone. There's like information overload, like notification overload. There's information overload as well. So it's kind of like, how do you put everything into the right bucket and then make those connections to really figure out, okay, this is maybe what I should have been doing, or maybe that's not what I should have been doing, just like you did. Or just like you said, like when you look back at some of the configurations you were thinking of, back in the day, like, wow, this would have led me to a really serious vulnerability now.
Yeah, and I mean, imposter syndrome should be embraced from my point of view. And it's okay to get stuff wrong. It's okay to go down a rabbit hole. That's our job, right? We are not there. We're not in the map game, right? We're not in the, here's a set of steps that you need to follow, and you're going to get to the destination, right? because we're looking for stuff that doesn't exist, or we're developing stuff that doesn't exist, or we're looking at stuff that we don't know, or that, you know, is not common. Even if it's common, it's complicated, right? Run a Procmon on a box on Windows and see how many events occur when you do nothing to it. It's like it's constantly changing at an individual like node level. So, you know, I don't think that this is the whole be curious, don't expect to be right all the time, and ask questions, right? Like, because not everyone knows.
Yeah.
We don't know lots of answers in this industry. We talk like we do, but honestly, we don't. We don't have omnipotent data sets. No one does. You know, go back to my Jason Bourne thing. Yes, you can put a lot of data together. Does it stop all the bad stuff happening in the world? Nope. Does it stop some of it? Sometimes.
If you're lucky, I think.
If you're lucky, and a lot of this stuff can be retrospective, right? It's a bit like, go and look at the logs. Yeah, what logs?
No, you know, precisely.
Like, and this is where I was getting it in. We've got a long way to go, and that's good because this stuff's really fun. But we need to get the right changes in society. I can't remember the numbers, but like, if you go and look at tenders, go to a government website, whatever country probably, and look at the scoring percentage security gets in tenders, and look at the percentage. Look at the number of people in the world, and then look at the number of IT people or technology people, and then look at the number of cybers people. It's a thin wedge.
That's an interesting angle of attack, actually, when you mentioned looking at those tenders. It's very interesting.
Well, another question. I don't know the answer to this. How many goodies are there? I love these phrases as well. I do them on purpose as well because I think threat actor and everything gets rather boring. So it's much better to talk about pews, baddies, and goodies than it, especially if I want to speak to people that don't speak security lingo. How many threat actors are there? And I'm not talking about just like nation states and just serious organized crime. How many threat actors are there? There's probably more than people would like to admit. How does that sit like in the geopolitical spectrum? How many defenders are there at country levels? How many attackers are there at country levels? How many people in your organization are defending? How many people are attacking? Like putting it into context of what's around you in your scenario, I think is really important. And you can reverse engineer the hell out of stuff. Go and read some annual reports, and bear with accounting processes, obviously, so take it all with a pinch of salt. That's pretty much a life lesson, isn't it? Everything isn't usually as you would expect it to be, nor as you think it is. But you can reverse engineer stuff and look at like, okay, well, what is it? And then what do we need to win? A major thing I find, I do quite a bit of work of estimation theory and literal estimations. Most people do not have a clue how long something takes to do. And most people's priorities, like if we look at the CIA triad, it's usually availability, integrity, and then confidentiality. If that's from a security perspective. I asked the same thing on LinkedIn, and everyone said integrity is really important. And I'm fairly sure that's because they meant whether they are personally have good integrity, right? I wasn't asking that. I was asking about system data and integrity. Most people do not operate out of malice on purpose. Most people don't sit there and ignore, like underinvest in cyber on purpose, but it's definitely not where people, it's not where it needs to be, and it's not where people, I think it is.
Yes, I think it's grossly underestimated as well as overestimated somehow.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good way of putting it. And again, and this isn't to say we need to stop chasing baddies, because we need to keep doing it. We need to do more of it. We need to be prosecuting what we know. We know as an industry an awful lot of stuff. We can't take down some pretty easy stuff. Being honest about it, right? You spin up a honeypot and check your logs for a bit. Do some analysis against the connections. Go and do some good old-fashioned investigation work. and then work out what you're going to do with the information you've got. And the answer to that suddenly becomes a lot grimmer. I think humans, I think we try and do stuff that's easy. Hell, I do, right? Like, is it easy to go and like tackle all the real hard security problems in society? Hell no, it's not. Is it easy to defend networks? No. Is finding out the flaws easier than fixing them? Hell yes. Is chasing baddies and making cartoons about them easier than defending against them? Probably, right? Like, and is it easier to sell using one thing? Is it the right thing to sell given the challenges of society? And I don't think we've got the balance right. I don't think we've got it completely wrong either. I mean, humans-wise, the number of people in this industry, they're amazing. Like, the people I meet are fantastic. I very rarely have a bad experience from a people point of view, and that's even with our nerd culture element to it. But I think when you abstract this stuff up, as a society, we've got challenges, and I think how we tackle those today is important. And I think it's going to take. Hell, I'll be dead, right? I will not be on this planet. Our cyber journey is going to be long. So what we do now is important, because the better we do things today, the more benefit of the next generation. And I'm talking about people, kids, families, like friends, like the people that we care about. The better they will be if we do our jobs good today. But in the end, that's what I'm like. Why does anyone do this stuff? I can't talk for anyone else. I do this stuff because I don't want the properties getting pwned. I don't want my mum getting fished and scammed. I don't want my friends getting done. And I don't want people to be. It's horrible. Like, in instance, you feel sick, like, and I'm talking about private, like, personal instance will make people feel sick, and there is significant harm. If someone gets in your phone and you've got videos you don't want to be public, and start, extorting you, etc., you're into a world of pain at a single person level. When we go to a country level and society level, it's awful. And that's ignoring the ransomware part of things, right? Like, that's, whether we're destroying something or not, but like the damage you can do with data is immense, and it is a personal thing, right? If a hospital or a medical company gets pwned and they lose all your data, you can, legally you generally can't defend against it. It's all very well and good giving Facebook the wrong information, but like, you can't give the medical services the wrong information about you. Oh, what's your blood type? Oh, I they check that, but but like, you can't defend, and there's a lot of stuff that could cause you significant harm off the back of it. So like, I want to make sure people have got way better to cyber defenses. That's generally my view on stuff, is how do we help protect people? How do we help protect their families? How do we help protect their businesses? And how do we protect their vital services? And that's sort of what makes me do weird stuff, like, say, let's try and download the internet as a joke. Or why are we going to go and look at stuff that other people may not be looking at? It's time consuming. This stuff is not. This is really difficult to say, this part as well, because there's this balance, isn't there, of how do you have a realistic work-life balance? How do you, and people will take the mick out of people, right? They will abuse people from how much effort they put in.
Yeah.
But how do you put a million microscopes everywhere? Maybe a million is the wrong phrase. Maybe it needs to be significantly higher. But we need to put microscopes all over the place, and that requires someone looking at them, because all the machine learning in the world isn't going to solve the problem of cybercrime.
Yeah, no, I think this philosophical discussion could also go on for hours, if I can be very honest with you, because there's so much that is left to be explored, and so much that is left unanswered in this entire industry as well. So, I mean, even coming off one of our own conferences in Munich, we were speaking to a lot of investigators who were talking about the fact that even teenagers are getting sextorted, and it's a crazy world out there because it happens on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And this is the other world, the other part of the cyber world as well. What's happening with all this data? Where's it going? How's it protected? Who's doing what to protect it anyways?
It is a problem, and it's unfortunate to say it like that, isn't it? It's a problem with a positive point of is that we're sitting on we're sitting here now talking about it. There's an entire industry. There are thousands, I don't know how many people there are, but like probably millions of people, or at least hundreds of thousands of people in the world who are daily getting up and saying, right, I'm gonna, I want to be a cybersecurity professional. I want to go and keep people safe, and I want to go and help. And that's fantastic. But it is difficult. It's like a sales funnel and like a cone, right? You've got a billion things of data being poured in, and what is important and what is not. And, I did some stuff recently, which is like a waterline of what actually happens if you're a £5 million business and you get ransomware. What do you do if you've done nothing before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you call and what do you do and who's going to come and save you? And the answer is no one is going to come and save you. You're going to get a crime reference number. Your insurance company, if you have a policy that covers it, will do whatever they do in terms of remuneration after the event. You will need to go and probably source some incident response. You can contact, you're not going to get the cyber cavalry is not rolling in for you unless you get your checkbook out. And even then, there's obviously generally a limited amount of support you can give, right? Someone isn't largely going to wave a magic cyber wand that doesn't exist and make all your problems go away. And I think that like making people understand what the risks are, what the threats are, what they need to be doing, and the guidance from like this stuff, the NCSC UK, CISA in the US. There's loads of guidance out there on this stuff. We're not reinventing wheels.
Mm-hmm.
But what we haven't got is the right investment. There's not the right investment in organisations, right? The quality level, and I use quality of this, I don't think people quite realise where they are. And I have a job that means telling people where they are, and that goes down really well sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't go down so well. And most people just don't know because there are hugely constrained IT teams. There's security teams they exist in managed service providers and they exist in some particular sectors. And for most companies, they don't have a security team. Or at least they don't have it. You're talking about something that on paper, and it's usually due to an insurance requirement. Someone has said, the chief information data protection officer is this board member, CFO, or someone. They've got responsibility for it, and that's it.
Yeah.
So we have got huge. I don't know what the skills gap stuff is, and it does drive me a little bit nuts because again, marketing. But we have got gaps in companies and these capabilities, and it's money, right? And hell, if I could do this stuff for free, I'd do it for free, right? This is fun. But like the world runs on money, so it's like if you don't have the right, if you haven't got the right investment profile and the right portfolio of money to support your technology and your security requirements, you're going to have a really hard time doing things. And money needs to involve people looking at systems. And I don't think people have quite got I don't think they quite realise, just because if you didn't do anything before, no shock. If you don't do something and then you do something, it usually costs more money.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I talk to, you're talking, I've been working now for 20 odd years, right? These are not new conversations. This is not revolutionary stuff. I've been doing maturity assessments and audits and health checks and reviews and designing and implementing and operating and doing all this stuff for 20 odd years, and I speak to colleagues and friends who are older than me, and it's you know, it's not new. This, I'm not coming out of anything like, oh my God, we didn't know this. As an industry, I don't think we talk about the stuff very well. I think our communications are sometimes not right, and maybe that's because I live in a world of bad stuff, and you know, I do get that we need to be positive, and I think I am a positive person at this stuff. But if you ignore the realities and just focus on jolly hockey sticks and everything, it doesn't fix the world. It just makes someone's 2-year tenure at somewhere successful that actually doesn't resolve the issues, right? Like, and I go into orgs and I'm looking at 10 years worth of technical debt with, 2008 R2 boxes or worse, in stuff that you really wouldn't want this stuff. And I'm like, this is not a 2-minute venture to come in and throw a few quid. And I mean, like, this isn't going to be fixed in $100,000. It's going to be fixed with millions, and I need it over a 5-year period. And then the cash flow needs to look like this, and that's what your security spend needs to look at. And people fall off their chair sometimes.
Yeah, it's a scary cost to put everything back in order, especially when you've started with, one of these little IBM boxes sitting in the corner of your office.
Yeah. Like, but what do people, and this bit I don't get, right? And it's because of my exposure as well. But like, I don't know what people expect sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm like, so you've not spent any money. Like, we'll go and look at the financial data. You've not spent any money for 10 years. Probably going to need to spend some money. And sometimes they're like, well, surely you can't. The words that I get back from people, and I mean this in a positive way, this isn't like an insult to anyone. The words I get back, I'm like, I don't know what to say to you, mate. That's not how finance, business, technology, or any of this stuff works. Without money, you are not going to be doing any change. And it's all business change. If you think about the business side of it, right, it's easier to, even if you look at, all of this is about change and technology integration into society, into organizations, into teams, into people, into processes. Like, and change doesn't occur just because you go, oh, I would love everything to, I'd love to have 10 Ferraris. Cool. Yep. What are you going to do to go and get them? And it's a bit like with go-to-markets on new product, right? My friends and I, we come up with really cool ideas. We build POCs. Sometimes they release stuff, but there's a lot of stuff, right? The idea could be amazing. The technology could be wonderful. It could be useless.
Could be useless.
A bit like the IBM box.
Yeah.
It could be sitting on the digital shelf collecting dust. I've been asked before, after scanning significant numbers of assets, very quickly afterwards, what are the top 5 things for us to fix? And I said, right? And I'm like, I don't know, man. It depends, doesn't it? Like, It depends if it's a long-term customer or if it's a short-term engagement or what, But this happens a lot, right? And I'm like, I don't know your business. I mean, I talk to people when we did like transformational pieces. I sit there and say to people, how long does your probationary period stand for in a contract if you hire someone? Mm-hmm. Is it 3 or 6 months? So in 2 weeks, for example, what do you think someone's going to be able to tell you about your business that you don't already know? And how do you think you're going to be able to come up with an answer of what to do off the back of, like, I don't do this, but like, let's say you did a day, and I've seen this in the world where a sales organization will parachute a technical person into an org. They'll do a day's workshop, and then a roadmap will be produced.
Yeah, that's.
You can see why I laughed, right? Like,
yeah.
Okay, I found 50,000 vulnerabilities and 100,000 criticals across 20,000 assets. I have no idea what you should do, mate. I think what you should do is put together a financial package and a structure that says, right, what's really important to me? A, make sure you've got some money, right? Without any money and resources, it doesn't matter whether you identify 5 things or 500, you won't be able to fix them. And then sit there and go, like, run through the process of saying, cool, we need a project. We need to go and get the right support from leadership. We need the right support from the board. We need the right money to do the actual, like, to do the what next bit.
Yep.
And to look at the money of it, right? Like, there's no point in, I say there's no point. Everything depends in this world, but that caveat aside, if you sit there and look through a service portfolio and you go through your CRMs, your ERPs, your management systems, your finance, your payroll, if you're like, cool, that payroll system is like super ancient and it's, you can pwn it all day long, and you're replacing it, you might sit there and make a decision that says, I don't care that it's not batched. You might shore it up. You might, isolate it on the network, or you might not. Because if you've got a team of 5 people to look after something like infrastructure, and someone's just walked in and said, you've got a bazillion vulnerabilities, and they're already maxed out, because almost every org I've been into, I don't think I've ever walked into an org and gone, is everyone bored sitting around doing nothing?
Yep.
Never.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, exactly.
I have always found situations where there are some individuals sitting around doing nothing. That's always fun. But largely speaking, teams are overutilized as it is, and that's with their 90% having a bad posture. So then you throw on a bucket load of vulnerabilities and security requirements and contractual, who's doing it?
Yep.
And sometimes that is the answer. The answer is silence. Thanks.
Yeah, let me just walk out of this place with a briefcase full of cash, or a briefcase full of reports. One of the two. It's going to be one of the two.
I think, and this is why I'm using the word despair, right? Because I don't ever hear it. But I have this sometimes, and my missus says to me, like, some people would go crazy. I have it some days where I'm like, oh, this is tough. Like, I don't win every battle, right? I don't go to every single board or every single exec and then say, yes, absolutely, we're game, let's do it. No one does. There is no infallible Gandalf level security professional. No one gets all the budget they need all the time. It's just not. These are not realistic things. And with all the budget in the world, if we look at some of the breaches, I won't bother trying to remember every name, but we see orgs that have got significant security postures, that have got significant investment, and they're still getting pwned. The problem of this bit is that then you have the people saying, oh, well, there's no point in spending any money because even they can't get it right. Well, that's a really not sensible, mature way of looking at investing in stuff, right? And hence why I'm like, this is about quality to your customers. This is about protecting your business. It's about protecting your value delivery chain. I'm not just saying spend money. Go through and do contract reviews and find out what your business has legally said it will do with its contractual obligations. That's always really fun.
And I can imagine.
Because I can't think of any contract I've really read, don't get me wrong, some old ones, but most contracts ask you to protect the data.
They do.
So when people it's weird. There's a few things I find that most people have got contractual obligations. They should probably read a little bit closer. Most people, if you're in public sector or that kind of space, that people will say you haven't got any money. Well, go look at your reports. You'll find out you've got quite a lot of money. Maybe it's not being spent in the right places. Maybe you haven't got the right lens. Maybe I haven't got the right lens as well, right? But if we're talking about how do we give people digital technology and let them enable them to do their business and their activities in a fast, safe, and efficient manner, sounds pretty. I'd want that. So it's just weird. Again, I think from a society, fiscal, markets, general point of view, where we talk in, sorry, marketing, that's getting a total bashing today, but
I know, right? It's one of those days. I don't think you're going to get your swag, man, because it's our marketing team.
But I mean, different orgs have completely different approaches as well, right? Like some orgs are really good, and some are less so. But if we're telling everyone that everyone's doing this and they're not doing that, and if we're saying, oh, you need this amazing cybers and it will protect you from your TLS weaknesses, it's like it's not helping people. It's just getting money out of people. And this is the bit that sometimes it's really hard to recognize the good from the bad, right? That's definitely an insert GIF moment, right? Like,
Yep.
There are people who are operating, and the question has to be said: are we the baddies, right? That's like, that's. I think it's a good question to ask. I ask myself when I'm doing stuff, especially if I'm doing research, right? But even when I'm doing stuff with customers inside networks, I am not going to go pilfering through someone's files if I can avoid doing it, right? If my objective is to get into the server and I'm like, my risk point is I'm going to have to go through someone's digital trash and it's their personal digital trash, I probably won't look at it, right?
Yep.
Like there is ethics, morals, and whatever phrasing that we've got to think, why are we here? What are we trying to do? How are we helping people? And don't get me wrong, because the answer is there's always a personal bit of, well, I'm helping myself because I want to get paid, or I want my business to grow, or whatever, right? But there should always be, I think, a little bit of check and balance to say, like, is this really the way we need to do it, and does it really help? And countering that with the, well, yeah, this is again philosophy of this stuff's fun, isn't it? If it's all screwed anyway, I may as well do it.
Unbelievable, Daniel. I think that's a good point to end on for today. But I think we could go down this philosophical rabbit hole for a while. It's been a pleasure having you. I appreciate your message. And let me talk to the girls in marketing to get some swagger.
Yeah, they're awesome though. Yeah, no, I've really had fun, and I don't run around trying to get onto webinars and podcasts and stuff. I'm probably the opposite. I get asked to do stuff, and I sit there going, like, do I want to do it? Is it helpful to people? Right? Like, I try and pick stuff. So for me, this has been like super fun.
I really like your message to that, and I think everyone needs to pick up on resiliency and being a little bit smarter about not just about how they protect data, but also how they protect the individuals in their companies. How people need to protect themselves, in the cyber realm that we're in. There's so much left to be desired.
You seem to have a pretty similar like mindset to me as well, right? Like, this is about helping people. So how do we do that? Like, and this is where, look, like, I love all the gadgets, right? Like, and this is why, I was gutted. I wanted to get. I've got like my Maltego. I think it's A1. Like that poster you guys made for me when I won that competition, right? And I wanted to put that up on my wall, and the frames arrived. And it sounds stupid, obviously. We won't tell anyone how long ago the poster arrived versus the frame. But like, it's really cool because there's space to make a difference. There's space to have. I was talking about that balance and stuff on how do we be good, and how do we, we all are in business. We all have to feed our families. How do we do it in the right way? So, like, to me, like, there's goodies and there's baddies, and then there's in between. So you guys are good, right?
Good stuff. You keep fighting the good fight, man, and I appreciate your time. It's been wonderful having you on, and all I can say is thank you, and perhaps a round two sometime.
Cool, nice one. Cheers, Brad.
Cheers, Dan. You take it easy.